My son is deaf. He has been since the day he was born. But 2 minutes before anything happens in my house, he hears it first. A clap, a creak, a scream. He hears it before it's real. Tonight, he heard a gunshot, and then he heard me screaming in a voice that hadn't happened yet. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, in order, because the order is the only thing that still makes sense to me right now. Stay with me until the end. You need to know what was on the other side of that door. My son's name is Danny. He was born completely deaf. A few months ago, we gave him a new kind of cochlear implant, an experimental one with a neural processor built into it, something that was supposed to connect directly to how his brain interprets sound. The doctor warned us there might be a delay while his brain adjusted. He called it an auditory processing lag. He snapped his fingers and told us Danny might hear that clap, but only react to it a few seconds later. Like a bad Bluetooth connection, he said. Give it time. It will sync up. We believed him. We had no reason not to, but the lag didn't fade the way he promised. Instead, it got stranger, and then it got specific. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. Danny and I were at the kitchen table. He was coloring, completely absorbing a picture of a dinosaur. His head bent so low his nose almost touched the page. Then he stopped. He lifted his head, tilted it toward the ceiling, like he was listening to something only he could hear. And then he made a sound. Thump. Scrape. I want you to understand something about my son. Even before the implant, he had this rare gift, a kind of perfect mimicry. The therapist called it a savant trait. He couldn't hear in the traditional sense, but he could feel vibrations in the air and somehow reproduce the exact pitch back to you, almost like an echo with a soul behind it. With the new implant, that mimicry became something else entirely. It became photorealistic. I asked him, "What was that, buddy?" He just pointed up at the ceiling. I didn't think much of it. Then, 2 minutes later, while I was standing at the oven watching the timer count down, I heard it. Thump. Scrape. The exact same sound. It was Mrs. Gable, our upstairs neighbor, dragging a chair across her floor. I stood there, frozen, the timer still ticking behind me. At first, I told myself it was a coincidence. But it happened again, and again. I started to time it. Every single time, it was exactly 2 minutes. That was when I understood something that made my skin crawl. Danny wasn't reacting late to sounds. He was reacting early. Somehow, some part of him was receiving the audio before it actually happened in our world. Like he had a 2-minute head start on reality itself. I know how that sounds. I tested it anyway, over and over, just the two of us. It became this strange, secret little game. He would mimic the low, whirring hum of the fridge compressor kicking on, and 2 minutes later, right on schedule, the fridge would kick on. He would mimic the chime of my phone's text tone, and 2 minutes later, my phone would light up in my hand. At first, it felt like magic. Then it felt unsettling. Then, tonight, it became something I don't think I will ever recover from. It was 9:40 in the evening. The house was completely silent, the kind of silence you only notice once it's interrupted. I was in the living room, reading. Danny was on the rug nearby, quietly building something out of his Legos. Then he stopped. He dropped the red brick from his hand. I watched his small shoulders climb up toward his ears, tensing, like he was bracing for impact. He opened his mouth, and the sound that came out was not one I had ever heard him make before. It was a sharp, violent crack, followed immediately by a wet, heavy thud. The kind of sound a melon makes when it's dropped onto concrete from a height. Then silence. A silence so complete it felt like the room itself was holding its breath. And then Danny started to scream. But it wasn't a scream. The sound that tore out of my son's small body was a deep, guttural roar. It was my voice. It was me screaming in a register so high and so terrified that just hearing it made my own throat ache in sympathy. No, please. God, no. Then came another sound. Rhythmic. Vet. Chunk. 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 I sat there with the book still in my trembling hands, barely able to form his name. Danny. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked on the front door. He mimicked a siren next. Distant at first, then climbing louder, closer, like it was racing toward our street. I glanced at the digital clock on the cable box. 9:41. I had less than 60 seconds before whatever this was caught up to the present. I stood up so fast my own heartbeat felt like something trying to escape my chest. I didn't know what the crack was. I didn't know what the wet thud meant. But I knew, without question, that the scream had been mine. I grabbed Danny's arm. "We're leaving," I told him. Right now. He didn't move. His body had gone heavy, limp, like dead weight in my hands. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and strangely vacant, and he made one final sound. A sharp, mechanical click-clack. I recognized it instantly. It was the slide of my own shotgun. The Mossberg I kept locked inside a safe in the garage. A safe whose combination only I know. That's when I heard the garage door opener hum to life. Not from Danny's mouth this time. From the actual garage. Someone was already inside our house. I looked at the clock one more time. 9:42. The handle on the door leading into the garage began, slowly, to turn. Danny clapped his hands over his ears and squeezed his eyes shut. He didn't want to hear it happen again. The handle kept turning. I didn't have time to think, only to react. I pulled Danny against me, shielding him with my body, my back to that door, my mind racing through every escape route in a house that suddenly felt like a trap. I'm not going to pretend I have a clean answer for you about what happened in the seconds after that. What I can tell you is this. Danny survived that night. So did I. But I never found out, not from any doctor, not from any specialist, why his mind began receiving sound 2 minutes ahead of the world around him. And I never figure out who unlocked that garage safe or how they knew the combination that only I was supposed to know. Some nights, Danny still tilts his head up toward the ceiling, listens to something only he can hear, and goes quiet. I have learned to watch the clock the second he does. I still don't fully understand what my son's implant actually connected him to. Was it sound traveling faster than it should? Or was he hearing something that hadn't decided to happen yet? Something that was still being written? If you had 60 seconds of warning before something terrible happened in your own home, would you believe your own child? Or would you assume, like I almost did, that was just a glitch? Tell me what you think really happened that night in the comments. This morning, my son broke character at the breakfast table. For years, I thought I knew exactly who my children were. I was wrong. By the end of that breakfast, I would find chains under a pillow, a secret 5 years in the making, and a truth about myself I never wanted my children to discover. Stay until the end. You will not see this coming. I have 3 children. Jonas, 16, Zach, a little younger, and Callie, my youngest. Most mornings in our house are loud, chaotic, the kind of noise that comes with 3 kids crammed around one table, fighting over the bathroom, bickering about cereal, kicking each other under the table just to start something. I complain about it sometimes, but that morning, the silence was worse. Jonas wasn't instigating anything. Zach wasn't fighting back. Callie just pushed her food around her plate without looking up. It was too quiet, and in my house, too quiet only ever meant one thing. Something had been broken. I looked up from my tablet. "Jonas," I said, "what's going on?" He couldn't meet my eyes. Zach flinched like I'd shouted, even though my voice had barely risen above normal. Callie ducked her head further, hiding behind her hair. I knew this stance. I'd seen it before, 5 years earlier, when they shattered my mother's vase playing some game in the living room. Quiet, guilty, waiting to be caught. So I sighed and told them whatever they'd broken, I didn't care as long as they fixed it. That's when Jonas said it. "Dad's hurting us." I almost missed it. I was reaching for the syrup, only half listening. He said it again, louder this time, his fork frozen above his plate, his voice cracking down the middle. "Dad is hurting us." Zach's head snapped up. His eyes locked onto his brother, wide with fear. "What are you doing?" he hissed. Then, too quickly, too brightly, he turned to me. "It's okay, Mom. Jonas is just... He's hurting us," Jonas said again, cutting him off. His voice had gone hollow, broken, in a way I had never heard from him before. "I'm not staying silent anymore," he whispered. "You too can, but I'm not." Then he said something that didn't sound like my son at all. "I can't do this anymore." He broke down, sobbing right there at the table. I stood up, moving toward him instinctively, the way any mother would. But the second I touched his shoulder, he flinched away from me like I'd struck him. His eyes went wide, almost feral. "Get away," he shouted, shoving back from the table. "Get away from me." I didn't listen. I wrapped my arms around him anyway, and after a few seconds of fighting me, screaming at me to let go, something in him gave out, and he collapsed into my shoulder, shaking. I kept my voice steady. Calm. Show me, I told him, because the truth was I couldn't afford to look scared. Not yet. If I showed them fear, I would lose whatever control I still had over this moment. I told Callie and Zach to stay at the table. Jonas led me upstairs on legs that didn't feel steady enough to hold me. He brought me into the room he shared with Zach, walked straight to his bed, and lifted the pillow. Underneath it, looped tightly around the bed frame, were chains. He turned to face me, his expression hollowed out. Ever since we tried to run, he said quietly, he's chained us to our beds at night. You try to run away, I said. Why would you? He cut me off before I could finish, gripping my shoulders, his nails pressing into my skin hard enough to hurt. Mom, he said, there's something I need to tell you, but you cannot freak out. You cannot call Dad. Just listen. I nodded, my chest tight, my breath shallow, and let him lead me back downstairs and out into the yard away from the house. 5 years ago, he started, a man approached me on a street in LA. I was 15. I was trying to become an actor. He told me I get paid every week. $500. For one job. His hand slipped out of mine. All I had to do, he said, was pretend to be your son. Pretend to be Jonas. The yard tilted around me. He kept going, his words tumbling out faster now, like he'd been holding them in for years and the dam had finally cracked. But then he stopped paying us, Jonas said. We tried to leave, tried calling the police. He got violent. He hit Zach. He started drugging our drinks at night. And when you weren't around, he chained us up. We've been prisoners in this house. I'm not even from here, he said, his voice breaking. I'm from Texas. I ran away because I thought I wanted to be famous. I never wanted any of this. We just want to go home, he whispered. Then he caught himself, correcting the word that had slipped out automatically. We just want to go home, Mom. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Zach was standing there, holding Callie's hand. I'm sorry for your loss, he said quietly. But we are not your children. He looked at Jonas. Get your things. We're leaving. Now. Jonas nodded. He turned to me one last time and pulled me into a quick hug. Thank you for saving us, he whispered. I'm sorry for your loss. I stood there in my own backyard, completely numb, as the three of them turned toward the back fence. And that's when my hand moved on its own, reaching into my jeans, closing around the gun I always kept there. Something inside me finally broke loose. I laughed, sharp and high, a sound that didn't belong to the mother they thought they knew. I walked forward and pressed the barrel against my daughter's head. Stupid kids, I said through my teeth. I wasn't losing them again. I had already buried my children once. I was never doing it a second time. Your father runs the program, I told them, clicking off the safety. I lowered the gun toward Callie's leg instead. Run, and I will take your legs first. They froze, and I smiled, savoring the question I'd been waiting years to ask. But who do you think chose you in the first place? I'm not going to tell you everything that happened after that moment in the yard. What I will tell you is this. The children who came before Jonas, Zach, and Callie never made it out of that backyard either. There had always been a program, a system run quietly, replacing children who were never coming back with new ones who looked close enough, who could learn to answer to the right names, who could fill a silence that grief alone never could. Jonas wasn't wrong about anything he told me. He just never understood who he was really talking to. I buried my real children once. I told myself for years that finding replacements was the only way to survive that kind of loss. But standing in that yard, gun in hand, watching 3 more children try to run from me, I finally understood something. I was never replacing what I lost. I was just choosing my next victims. So I have to ask you, if you found chains under your own child's pillow, would you have believed them immediately? Or would some part of you, like Jonas feared, have refused to listen until it was already too late? Tell me what you would have done in the comments below.